Chapter 241, Language of Foulness. There was only a single candle that illuminated the room. The atmosphere in the living room was so silent that it was as if everything had frozen. A few seconds later, the suspected apothecary finally muttered,
"Why don't you leave an address? That way, I can get something out of your body."
He looks like he's cursing me, but he's actually persuading me otherwise.
Klein pretended not to understand and said to Blacksnake,
I don't have any chance of survival if I don't gamble. There'll be that sliver of hope if I gamble on it. Shasolina, I won't sit back and wait for death.
Hearing this, Eye of Wisdom, who was about to say something, shut his mouth because he couldn't offer any other hope.
I really admire your character.
Blacksnake laughed.
I also admire you. In the past, I had quite a few friends who had such characters. Now, I visit their tombstones every year and place a bunch of flowers there.
The suspected apothecary mused in a mocking but actually persuasive manner. He didn't care that Blacksnake was a better fighter than he was. He said whatever he wanted to.
Mr. Apothecary must have suffered because of his temper.
Klein was secretly grateful. He handed the iron cigar case containing the hunter-beyonder characteristic to the attendant, who brought it to Eye of Wisdom. The old gentleman counted out 400 pounds in cash from the suitcase beside him and got the attendant to pass it on to Blacksnake. Blacksnake casually took a glance and said,
I believe in Mr. Eye of Wisdom.
He took out a small wooden box, bent down, and placed it on the ground. He pushed the box so that the object slid to Klein without going through the attendant. The moment Klein's fingers touched the surface of the box, he heard faint, illusory sounds and immediately felt a strong sense of dizziness. For him, this wasn't something he couldn't handle. It wasn't even comparable to the illusory voices of Justice and company when they pray to him. After sitting up straight again, Klein carefully opened the wooden box and saw an ear inside. The ears looked real, except that the skin was dark and there were a few green areas where it had rotted. Klein asked,
How do I use it?
Blacksnake casually replied,
Grasping it without gloves is the same as using it. Heh, you'd better go home and try it when you're alone.
Klein didn't ask any further questions. He closed the box and put it into his pocket. He deliberately smiled bitterly and said,
This makes me dizzy.
After a short moment of silence, the suspected apothecary suddenly shouted,
I want to buy Spring of the Elves marrow crystals. Who has it?
As his voice echoed in the air, no one answered. The apothecary smacked his lips and mumbled,
Seriously, there's no answer every time this is asked.
Eye of Wisdom quipped,
Maybe you could book a cruise to Sonia Island.
The Spring of the Elves was also known as the Sonia Golden Springs, and one could tell from its name where it came from. The Spring of the Elves was a commonly seen liquid and was an object with rich spirituality. However, the marrow crystals were considered beyonder ingredients and not easily purchasable. After that, there were a few failed transactions at the gathering. Eye of Wisdom clapped his hands and said,
Let's end it here today. According to the convention, we leave one by one, each separated by 3 minutes.
Leaving one by one, each separated by 3 minutes. This is to prevent the gathering members from being tailed and robbed?
When Klein received the signal from Eye of Wisdom, he stood up and, guided by the attendant, left the activity room and went to the door. He took off his hooded robe and handed it back to the attendant before following the path in his memories back to the back door of the Bravehearts bar. He then removed his iron mask and walked through the kitchen to see Caspar standing outside the card room, over the barking of dogs and clamoring of people.
I'm delighted that you could come back.
The red-nosed elder heaved a sigh of relief, the nasty wounds on his face seemingly trembling. Wes. Klein leaned over and said in a low voice,
Are there such gatherings in the future?
It seems like you didn't get what you wanted. Holy Lord of Storms, I don't think you should continue wasting your time.
Caspar scanned this customer he felt worried for.
Maybe it'll take a few days. I don't know the details. Let's see if you can make it in time.
Klein nodded and asked,
Is Marek here?
You're still trying to convince him? No, it will only anger him.
Caspers warned him in a deep voice.
He's in the card room behind you.
No, I'm not going to convince him. I'm trying to stay as far away from him as possible so that his zombies won't go into mutiny.
Klein touched Ezek's copper whistle in his pocket.
I understand.
He left the Bravehearts bar at once, went to the one-bedroom apartment in East Borough to relieve himself before returning to Minsk Street. Inside the card room, Merrick had gone all in and confidently flipped open his cards. He had 3 kings and a pair of 9s, and the zombie opposite him had a pair of 6s and an 8. Suddenly, the zombie took the initiative to reveal its hidden cards, a pair of 6s. This round, it won with 4 6s. The pale Merrick sat there blankly and immediately felt all the surrounding zombies coldly staring at him. A few minutes later, he staggered out the card room on shaky feet and almost collapsed at the door, while his usual entourage of subordinates inside the room fell to the ground. Marek ordered in a hoarse voice as he looked at the stunned Caspers.
Don't let anyone in before dawn.
He took out a white handkerchief and wiped the corner of his mouth. The handkerchief was quickly dyed with a dark blue tint with some redness. After receiving Kaspar's acknowledgement, Merrick found a chair to sit and asked for a barrel of Southville beer. He stared blankly as he drank. At 15 Minsk Street, Klein followed his usual routine of washing up and returning to his room before he drew the curtains. After waiting for over 10 minutes and confirming that there were no specks of spirituality around, he started to summon himself. He responded to himself and brought the wooden box containing the black ear into the mysterious space above the gray fog. The illusory crimson stars didn't twinkle at all as Klein sat at the seat of honor of the long ancient table and opened the wooden box. This time he didn't hear any murmurs or feel dizzy. The boundless gray fog seemed to isolate all external sounds. Klein let out a sigh of relief. He was now much more confident with his impending attempt and much more confident about his own safety. With a thought, he blocked his own hearing and performed a few experiments to confirm the effects.
That's right.
Klein nodded in satisfaction, reached out, and grabbed the black ear with signs of rot. He felt its coldness and slipperiness, but he didn't hear the voice of the great being that was described by Black Snake.
Completely isolated? This won't do. It's impossible to use it alone.
Klein muttered to himself, puzzled as he thought of the methods he could use to stimulate an effect. After a dozen or so seconds, he conjured a pen and paper, intending to emulate the process he used to spy on the eternal blazing sun previously.
That time, I looked directly at the eternal blazing sun through the use of divine blood. This time, I'm only using the remains left behind by a listener, so it definitely isn't that dangerous.
Klein wrote down a divination statement without any hesitation.
The origin of this item.
He took a breath, held the black ear, and leaned back as he recited the divination statement. After reciting it 7 times, his eyes darkened as he entered a deep slumber. In this blurry, shattered, and gray world, Klein saw a man struggling on the ground. He rolled, screamed, and his eyes bulged out. His body swelled like a balloon, and countless hairs on his body turned black and long. Soon after, an extremely evil and foul voice rang in Klein's ears, waking him up instantly. It was different from the ravings and howling that came from the mysterious space above the gray fog. This sound was more penetrating, more purposeful, and more active. Klein covered his ears and isolated any fallout, but the same voice echoed in his head. He saw his vessels and veins bulge out as if they had become thick, squirming, venomous snakes. Bang! His blood vessels burst, and his veins broke off from his body, spreading out into slippery tentacles filled with sinister patterns. The gray fog slightly swayed, making the giant's palace look like it was about to corrode. Unlike the incident with the eternal blazing sun, Klein still retained his sanity and didn't roll over on the ground. He gripped the handrail tightly and endured the pain. After a few seconds, the slightly swaying gray fog regained its calm, and the evil voice that echoed in Klein's mind completely died down. One tentacle after another fell to the ground, and his wounds began to rapidly heal.
Interacting with deities is truly a dangerous matter, regardless of the method. Thankfully, I didn't face the true creator directly this time. If not, I'll have remnants of madness and signs of losing control and would affect my body in the real world.
Klein weakly leaned back into his chair and silently mocked himself. This process was within his expectations, and it didn't go out of his control.
The only thing that surprised him was that the true creator appeared to be slightly stronger than the eternal blazing sun.
Just as Klein's thoughts were about to wander off, he saw the black ear in his palm suddenly crumbled, turning into tiny specks of black light.
It has become a pure, beyonder characteristic?
Amidst his confusion, he saw through the corner of his eyes that the sinister patterned tentacles were still twitching on the ground. They were the aspects of madness and loss of control that had been stripped from his body. These tentacles gradually turned transparent and were about to disappear. A flash of brilliance came to Klein's mind. He scattered the tiny black light specks in his palm at those slippery tentacles. An illusionary black gas rose up and turned into a sky that constantly streaked with lightning. The background was extremely dense and gloomy. All of this quickly disappeared from Klein's eyes. On the surface of the iron-black charm on the ground were many symbols, magic labels, sinister patterns, and twisted path numbers. Klein bent down and picked it up, with the feeling that what was sealed inside were howling maniacs. With the help of his divination techniques, he was able to barely decipher the use of this charm from its revelation. It was to let the opponent hear a terrifying roar, infecting them with madness. As for the final result, it depended on the target's ability to resist such attacks. If the target was strong, then they might benefit from it, but the price was becoming a devout believer of the true creator, and if he was weak, he would collapse on the spot, dying amidst tragic cries.
I'll call it language of foulness.
Klein muttered and set an incantation to activate it. Chapter 242. Bakerland. Early Tuesday morning, Klein woke up naturally and prepared 2 slices of toast, a piece of butter, a serving of bacon, and a cup of coffee before leisurely reading a newspaper while having breakfast. With the terrifying language of foulness charm, he was much more at ease. He was no longer as tense as he was before. Klein finished flipping through the Bakerland Bulletin, picked up the Tussock Times, and saw a news article on the second page. At 2 o'clock this morning, there was a fierce gunfight at Red Brick Alley in the East Borough. According to the police, it is suspected to be a clash between 2 gangs, one of which is the notorious Zeemanger Gang. The Zeemanger Gang, Red Brick Alley in the East Borough. A thought occurred to Klein as he left the dining table and found the map of Bakerland. With just a glance, he noticed that Red Brick Alley wasn't far from Bacardi Street. Furthermore, Ian Wright had previously appeared at the telegraph office on Bacardi Street.
Was Red Brick Alley where Ian Wright was hiding? Was the violent conflict between the military's special department and the intelligence staff of the Intis Republic? I wonder what the result will be.
Klein picked up the last of the bacon, put it in his mouth, and chewed it slowly. He had informed both sides about the divination the previous morning, and they had already locked onto Ian's location that very night, which implied quite a high level of efficiency. After taking a sip of coffee, Klein put down the newspaper and fell into deep thought. Suddenly, he heard the tinkling of the doorbell. Klein wiped his mouth with a napkin and headed for the door, puzzled.
Who is it? Could it be a new commission? For the past few days, I've been out and about because of the Intis ambassador. I wonder how many jobs and potential clients I've lost. It's such a waste of my advertising money. If this goes on, my finances will be stretched to the limit.
Klein suddenly thought of something and opened the door. Standing outside were 2 ladies, one of them being Mrs. Sammer, who wore a dressing gown. She had intricate makeup on her face, making her look more beautiful than at home, and nothing like she was in her 30s. The other lady wore a wide-brimmed hat with a black tartan veil and a darker, more fluffy dress. Stellan Sammer held onto her veiled hat, but there was no hint of a smile in her blue eyes.
Detective Moriarty, I have a friend who needs your help.
Klein pointed to the living room, and while he was turning around, he took the opportunity to fasten the top button of his shirt and adjusted his black vest.
Please come in.
Stellan nodded slightly, and, without another word, led the black-veiled lady into the room. She knew the place very well, and without Klein's guidance, easily found the sofa and took her seat. Klein wanted to immediately start asking, but then thought about Stellan Sammer's style of doing things, so he asked with a smile,
Coffee or tea?
In his eyes, Mrs. Sammer was a lady who pursued a high quality of life and tried to show her superiority all the time. Here, the other lady took off her hat.
There's no need.
She had good features, but the combination was disappointing. In addition, her cheekbones were too high, and she looked older than her actual age. A little anger, a little sadness, a little hesitation, a little fear. Klein read the lady's emotions. It wasn't that he suddenly possessed the abilities of a spectator, but that the lady's actions were just too obvious. Stellan imitated a position found in magazines, trying her best to appear classy.
Yes, neither coffee nor tea can solve the problem. This is Mrs. Mary Gale, a shareholder of Coin Company.
Klein sat down on a single-seater, leaning forward slightly and resting his arms on his thighs.
What would you like to entrust me with, Mrs. Gale?
Mary Gale pursed her lips.
Don't call me Mrs. Gale. Just call me Mary. I wish for you to tail my husband and confirm if he has a mistress. It's best if you can obtain material evidence.
As a result of the Church of Evernight's active push for years, the Lowen Kingdom was more radical in its marriage laws than the other countries, such as Fasak, Intis, and Lemberg. It stipulated that those who committed adultery had to pay a financial price for it, which meant that the adulterer would be at an absolute disadvantage during the division of property.
I've heard that at least 4 out of 10 of the other private detectives are investigating extramarital affairs. I didn't expect that I would receive such a job too.
Klein said thoughtfully,
Material evidence is not easy to obtain.
Mary replied without any hesitation,
I'll lend you the latest portable camera. As long as you have the evidence, I will pay you £10. If you only confirm that he has a mistress, you will only receive £3.
You mean the so-called portable camera that's about 2/3 the size of my head? £10, this isn't a low price.
Klein has been focusing on entrepreneurship and knew about the latest cameras. He hesitated for 2 seconds before saying,
All right, but you have to provide me with detailed information about your husband and his regular activities.
Mary paused for 1 second before gathering all her strength to say it.
No problem.
Stellan reminded him.
Thank you for your help. I hope you won't tell anyone else about this.
Hearing this, Klein immediately sighed.
I'm a person who upholds confidentiality, and I often get into trouble for that.
In the lobby of Earl Wolf's house, men and women were dancing amid violin tunes. Audrey was carrying a glass of pale gold champagne when she accidentally bumped into the Intis Republic ambassador to Lowen, Bakerland Jean Madon. Bakerland, with his thin face and slight stubble, pecked Audrey's white-gauzed glove with a kiss, according to propriety customs. His eyes looked passionate and bold.
You're the most beautiful young lady I've ever met.
Audrey rolled her eyes and said with a chuckle.
Is this the way people from Intis talk?
Bakerland chuckled.
Yes, we are never stingy with praise for beautiful things. If it wasn't for the style of the Lowen Kingdom, I might have called you my angel.
Old pervert.
Audrey maintained her graceful smile and said,
The people of Lowen and Intis are indeed different.
Bakerland squinted his eyes and said,
Heh, that makes me think of a joke. Please allow me to be presumptuous. After a good time with a beautiful girl, most Lowen men would say, oh dear, I'd like a cigarette, but most Intis men would say.
He deliberately paused, and Audrey tilted her head, trying her best to keep her nausea in check while looking puzzled.
What would they say?
Bakerland raised his glass and laughed.
Most of the Intis men would say, oh baby, I have to return now and can't be discovered by my wife.
Audrey smiled politely.
People who can laugh at themselves always have an additional charm to them.
Her beautiful, clear, dark green eyes suddenly turned to look behind Ambassador Bakerland.
I'm sorry. A friend is looking for me.
Bakerland bowed and moved aside.
It's a pleasure talking to you.
Audrey moved forward gracefully and didn't look back again. Just as she was considering who she should find as the object of her excuse, a young gentleman approached her and, lowering his voice, warned her.
Audrey, don't be fooled by that Ambassador Bakerland. He's a dirty old man. I don't know how many women he's tricked into bed.
Bakerland is lustful? This is in line with my observations. This is a weakness.
Audrey smiled without hiding her disgust.
Can't say, do you have a misconception about me? Goddess, how could I be bewitched by that Ambassador Bakerland? His cologne makes me want to vomit. His words are so foul, and his taste is like a male peacock.
Cansay was Viscount Learson's youngest son, and their family was on fairly good terms with the Hall family. According to Audrey, Cansay had entered MI9 after graduating from Tingen University and had become quite enigmatic. Her original plan had been to have a chat with Ambassador Bakerland and observe him up close before using the pretext of exasperation to get more information from Cansay and his other friends from the intelligence community to learn more about him. To her surprise, she didn't need to seek out Cansay Learson, since he came over and started the corresponding conversation on his own accord. Cansay gave a sincere smile. He surveyed his surroundings and whispered,
Your feelings are correct. Besides, Bakerland is a very dangerous fellow.
Audrey asked curiously.
How dangerous?
Cansay said with some deliberation.
Have you heard of Beyonders? I know that you've always been interested in such matters.
Audrey gently nodded.
I know quite a bit. Most of it being told to me by Glaint.
Cansay took a glance at Bakerland, who was chatting with an affluent lady, and said with a serious expression,
He's Intiz's intelligence head in our kingdom. He's done numerous atrocities, but we haven't been able to gather any evidence of his crimes. He's a Sequence 6, a conspirer.
He didn't go into details with an outsider like Audrey, nor did he mention that Conspirer was part of the Hunter pathway. However, Audrey was already aware of this. She feigned naivete and sighed.
He's really amazing.
Cansay added in passing,
He has an assistant in the shadows, one that has perhaps reached Sequence 5. In addition to that, all of the entire intelligence agents in the kingdom are under his management. Many of them are Beyonders. Unfortunately, we only know a few of them. Don't be too happy if Bakerland praises you either. It's not what he truly thinks. He just wants to use this opportunity to gather more information.
I don't like what you're saying.
Audrey looked up at the ornate chandelier and thought for a few seconds.
Is Bakerland very smart? You haven't managed to get any incriminating evidence.
Cansay stroked his chin and said,
He truly is good at scheming, but he also has a lot of problems. He likes to chase after women and loves the feeling of romance. He takes risks and is quite radical. If it wasn't for his identity as an ambassador preventing us from taking action easily, he would have been captured long ago. However, he'll be replaced very soon. Very soon.
Audrey asked in surprise.
Why?
Cansay adhered to the principle of confidentiality.
My dear beautiful lady, this isn't something you should know.
When the ball was almost over, Audrey, who had gathered quite a bit of information, found Viscount Glaint and asked him to help her contact Gio and Fours. Chapter 243, Catching the Adulterous Act, Wednesday morning opposite the Coin Company in the Cherwood Borough. Klein was sitting on a wooden bench outside the Gartley department store, clutching a paper bag containing the most famous Cindy Desi pie in the area with one hand and holding a cup of iced tea in the other. Beside him, a tramp was curled up on the other side of the bench, sleeping. 10 minutes later, the mall's security guard woke him up and shooed him away. Klein wore gold-rimmed spectacles, which didn't provide for any vision correction, and a silk half-top hat. He didn't look much different from most of the gentlemen around him. He idly looked across the street at the Coin Company, lifted his right hand, and took a large bite of the Cindy Desi pie. He felt the rich aroma gush out and fill his oral cavity. The reason why this pie from Desi Bay stood out amongst the southern pies was that it used a lot of oil and fat, but the meat was chopped into very tiny bits. With the fat and lean meat mixed together, it didn't feel too heavy. The rich, meaty juice seeped into the outer crust, neutralizing the dryness and made up for its shortcomings. The wheat fragrance was clearly brought out, and the small pieces of crushed apples were used to stimulate appetite with a slightly sour and sweet taste, while neutralizing the oily taste.
It's okay. Although the weather isn't good and the pollution is terrible, Bakerland is far superior to Tianjin in many other aspects. Foods of all styles can be found everywhere. There are all kinds of operas and plays available. They can be enjoyed as long as one isn't afraid to spend money. Although I might not necessarily eat or partake in such entertainment, I have these options at the very least. This is the advantage of a big city.
Klein raised his sweet iced tea and took a sip. He never took his eyes off the coin company's entrance. For that 10 pounds, he had been sitting there since 8 in the morning. Even his breakfast was bought on the way there. Of course, for most private detectives, a commission of 10 pounds was an absolutely enviable business, equivalent to about 3 weeks' salary for a member of the middle class. According to the information provided by Mary Gale, her husband was currently the first manager of Coim Company and was Luke Sammer's superior. However, their shares in the Coim Company came from Mary's father, and Mary had inherited it. One of the immediate reasons she suspected her husband of having a mistress was that an employee in the company had divulged to her that Dorigu Gale would leave the office on Wednesday and Friday mornings alone and only return in the afternoon. In addition, he would leave work early for 2 days a week, and Mary had never seen her husband return home before 7. After breakfast, Klein waited another hour plus before seeing his target walk out of Coim. He was wearing a black top hat, a double-breasted tweed coat, and a standard bow tie. He was slightly fat, with yellowish temples, slightly brownish eyes, and a slightly long face. He silently recited his target's name.
Dorigu Gale.
Klein stood up, picked up his cane and his heavy portable camera, and crossed the road. Instead of getting his carriage driver to pick him up, he stood by the side of the road and looked around for a rental carriage. Klein took the opportunity to cross the road and arrive beside him. Pretending to be careless, he bumped into his target. Klein bowed his head in apology.
Sorry, I'm quite lost.
Dorigu frowned, but remained silent, waving his hand to indicate that it didn't matter. Klein bent down, bowed, and walked to the end of the street. He didn't run into Dorigu in order to steal his belongings and use the dowsing method to easily track him. That would have been easily noticeable. Instead, Klein had only done one thing when he collided with Dorigu. With the help of his agility as a clown, he had secretly slipped a spare button of his into one of the pockets of Dorigu's double-breasted coat. Going around a corner, he stopped and looked back just in time to see Dorigu board a rental carriage. Klein was in no hurry to tail him. He waited patiently for a few minutes before slowly getting into another horse carriage and said to the carriage driver,
Just go according to my instructions. Head to the end of the street first.
All right.
The driver didn't ask why. Inside the carriage, Klein leaned his cane and began performing a divination. However, his divination statement wasn't directed at Dorigu Gale. Instead, it became the whereabouts of the spare button of my clothes. The dowsing rod seeking was originally the most practical technique to find objects. Only seers were able to use it to seek people. Now Klein was using it in its original form. The easiest and most convenient items to find were those that belonged to himself. Along the way, Klein kept getting the carriage driver to change directions until they finally arrived at a street house in the Hillston borough. When they first circled it, Klein noticed that there were gardens and lawns behind the house, which was different from the other houses. His dowsing method told him that Dorigu Gale was inside that house. After paying the 2 soldi fare, Klein walked to the door with marble statues outside. He saw 2 men in black and white plaid uniforms that resembled the police uniform. One of them, a brown-skinned man of southern continent blood, stopped Klein.
I don't know you. Where's your proof of membership?
Klein hid his heavy camera behind him and asked with a slight frown.
Proof of membership?
The brown-skinned man immediately turned stern.
This is the Quelaag Club. Only our members, and up to one of their guests can enter.
Klein tersely acknowledged.
Then how can I join your club?
The brown-skinned man didn't brutally chase him away, but patiently answered the question.
You can only join after receiving a recommendation from 2 members.
He couldn't guarantee that Klein would end up joining the club eventually. Klein pursed his lips and decided to put Plan B into motion.
All right.
He found a hotel near the Quelaag Club and got a short-stay room for 4 hours. Then he locked the door behind him, drew the curtains, and entered the space above the gray fog. He conjured a yellowish-brown goatskin and a fountain pen in front of him. Taking a deep breath, Klein wrote the exact same divination sentence as before, the whereabouts of the spare button of my clothes. This time, he didn't use the dowsing method, but a dream divination. The reason why he didn't do it in the real world was because Klein felt that the Quelaag Club seemed to be quite a high-end club, and he suspected that there might be some powerful beyonders inside. In order to not waste time, he decided to get it done once and for all. In the gray, dreamy world, Klein was the first to see Dorigu's black coat, which was hung on a coat rack. On the carpet in front of it was a round table. The scene zoomed out, and the sight of a romping man and woman entered Klein's eye. The man was Dorigu Gale. The woman had shimmering blonde hair who looked rather young. She was in her early 20s at most. The pained expression with her knitted brows does look rather coquettish.
Why am I always seeing scenes such as this?
Klein covered his eyes and woke up.
The fact that Dorigu has a mistress is confirmed. How do I get material evidence? By responding to my prayers? But this is limited to what I can obtain with my own body. I can only do it through sketching and not through the camera. I can't possibly draw a picture with my bare hands, can I? It looks like today won't do. I'll tell that girl and find out her address and name later. I refuse to believe that they'll be inside the Quelaag Club every time they meet.
Detective Klein quickly came up with his next course of action. Just as he was about to leave the mysterious space above the gray fog, he suddenly thought of something. He decided to take the opportunity to divine if the iron-black threadworm, which had infiltrated his room, was under the control of a beyonder of the seer pathway. He didn't do so before because he felt that the relevant information was too scarce, and it was difficult to create something out of nothing which would result in a failed divination. It would have been the same if he was above the gray fog. Furthermore, he had various matters to divine the few times he came above the gray fog previously, and he didn't have the capacity to bother with such a question. Now that he was free, he decided that it wouldn't hurt to do the divination. As for the question of whether it was risky to contact Azek, he had already long divined it. The answer was that it was risky, and not something trivial, so he could only use it as his last resort. After writing the corresponding divination statement, Klein removed the silver chain from his sleeve and allowed the topaz pendant to hang over the paper. The iron-black threadworm that sneaked into my room was controlled by a beyonder from the seer pathway. After repeating it 7 times, Klein opened his eyes and saw that the spirit pendulum was spinning clockwise with great amplitude and frequency.
Positive. The answer is positive. Shouldn't it have failed?
Klein didn't expect to obtain such an answer. According to his seer instincts, such a divination was likely to fail.
Why?
He frowned and thought for a while before deciding to switch to a different method of divination and target. He wanted to directly divine the controller using dream divination. This time, Klein saw nothing in his dream and couldn't get the corresponding revelation about the seer pathway beyonder. He muttered and thought back to the prior divination and fell into deep thought.
That's more like it. They should have been a lack of conditions and result in a failed divination just like the one that followed. Could it be that this mysterious space had filled in the necessary conditions? Does it contain something of the seer pathway?
Klein suddenly had a flash of inspiration. He had a bold idea.
Perhaps the mysterious space above the gray fog had something to do with the path of the seer pathway.
Klein lightly rapped the edge of the ancient table. Despite thinking about it, he couldn't find any other evidence. He could only temporarily put this matter on hold and prepare for his return to the real world.
Regardless, I've confirmed at least one thing. The mid-sequence Beyonder beside the ambassador is from the seer pathway, and whether he's a member of the secret order doesn't matter. This might be my chance of obtaining the sequence 7 and even the sequence 6 potion formula.
Klein extended his spirituality and wrapped it around him before plunging into the gray fog. Meanwhile, in Viscount Glaint's study, Audrey let the master of the study guard the door while she looked at Geo and Fours. After a few seconds of silence, she said,
I need your help with a mission.
Geo's eyes lit up as if she could smell the ink on the bills.
What mission?
Audrey gave her a polite smile.
Assassinate the Intis ambassador to the Loan Kingdom, Bakerland Jean Madon.
Chapter 244, Appointee.
What?
Fours touched her earlobes, wondering if she had heard wrongly. The beautiful, naive, curious, and scatterbrained Miss Audrey actually assigned an assassination mission? Furthermore, the target is the ambassador of Intis, a powerful country in the northern continent. Geo was slow on the uptake as she hesitantly said,
Our strength isn't enough to complete this mission.
The first thing she considered was the difficulty of the mission. Audrey ignored her question and allowed her to imagine the reason. She said, with faint dimples showing,
I'm not asking you to take the job. I just wish for you to find a Beyonder with the strength to complete it. For example, Mr. A, I'll pay you 4,000 gold pounds for this. Of course, this is only my initial offer. The details are negotiable. If it eventually succeeds, I'll pay you 500 pounds. Even if the mission ends up failing, you will receive 200 pounds due to the risk you have taken.
Her uninvested annuity and the rest of the bounty was around 13,000 pounds. However, any large utilization of it would certainly attract the attention of Earl Hall, and even the Varvat Bank would investigate. She had calculated that 5,000 pounds was the tipping point, and it was best not to exceed it. 4,000 gold pounds. Geo heard her own heavy breathing, but she quickly became depressed, knowing full well that she wouldn't be able to complete the mission herself.
Just 500 pounds to seek out other Beyonders in our names while maintaining it a secret. Miss Audrey is the most generous and beautiful lady I've ever seen.
Geo quickly returned to reality. While feeling enticed, Force's mind was filled with questions.
Why would Miss Audrey delegate such a mission? Is there some internal strife among nobles? Is this the precursor to inciting a war? Is Earl Hall representing some important figure in a bid to make the situation turn chaotic?
The duo quickly contacted Mr. A using a previously agreed-upon channel. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, when the rare sunlight shined through the fog and lit up the whole of Bakerland, they arrived at the house where they had previously participated in gatherings. There, they saw Mr. A sitting with his legs up and his hood over his head, but he gave off a condescending air.
You said that you have something important to talk to me about?
Mr. A's eyes moved back and forth between the two ladies.
I heard that some female Beyonders would use their bodies to trade for potion ingredients with Mr. A. He's really a disgusting pervert.
Force curled her lips and said,
There's a large transaction. I wonder if you're interested in it.
Mr. A scanned Geo's face and chuckled.
Tell me. Let's see what this large transaction is.
Holding back the urge to draw her triangular blade, Geo answered with the tone of an arbiter.
Assassinate the Intis ambassador to the Loan Kingdom, Bakerland Jean Madon.
Mr. A fell silent, but since his expression was obscured by the shadow of his hood, Geo and Fours couldn't guess what he was thinking. After a while, he slowly leaned back and said with a deep voice,
So what's the reward?
4,000 pounds. In addition, we will provide the relevant information, such as Ambassador Bakerland is a Sequence 6 conspirer of the Hunter Pathway, or that his weakness is lust.
Geo tried her best to make Mr. A believe that there was hope in completing the mission. Mr. A chuckled and said,
I can accept this mission, but the reward must be raised. The first choice, the potion formulas to Unshadowed, Cataclysmic Inter, Prophet, or Manipulator. Of course, their price is higher than this mission. There's no need for the complete formula. A partial formula will suffice. The second choice, 10,000 gold pounds. Heh, this is the bounty of Vice Admiral Hurricane Kulongos. Bakerland's strength definitely isn't as strong as he is, but he has powerful aides. Besides, believe me, he definitely has mystical objects on him.
A reasonable price, but that's also an exaggerated price. Shio and Fors looked at each other and said,
We shall return and discuss it. At this time tomorrow, we'll give you our answer.
Sure.
Mr. A made a gesture of farewell. After being led out by an attendant, Fors murmured in puzzlement.
Those are high-sequence Beyonder formulas? Frankly speaking, I find it strange. I thought Mr. A would only want formulas or potion ingredients. Money shouldn't be a necessity for him.
Shio turned to look at her friend.
Fors, you really are a naive clinical doctor and author. You must know that Mr. A has many subordinates. They need a house to sleep in, stomachs to fill, clothes to buy, and the need to vent their desires. All of this has to be bought using money. Besides, to some nobles who have declined, what wouldn't they sell if there are gold pounds to be made? Without his men, Mr. A would be just as scary, but he will be rather lacking in intelligence. That's what all the small gangs in the East Borough know.
Fors frowned and said,
Zio, you're not that stupid after all.
In the evening, the two of them met the familiar large golden retriever at a predetermined location and passed Mr. A's reply to Audrey. When Audrey finished reading the note, not only did she not feel stumped, she even let out a long sigh of relief.
It was simply wonderful for her that she could finish the ambassador with just 10,000 gold pounds. For the time being, I can only use 5,000 pounds. I'll still have to pay CO and Fors 500 pounds. Well, first of all, I'll borrow 6,000 pounds. No, 8,000 pounds from Glaint. I can't expose any problems with my daily expenses. Then, I'll pay him back over 4 to 5 months with interest of 1,000 pounds. Before the new year, I will be quite poor, having only 1,000 pounds to use a month.
Audrey quickly made her decision. Then she burned the original slip of paper and wrote on a new piece of paper.
The second option. An advance of 2,000 pounds and the remaining 8,000 pounds will be paid after the mission is completed.
At 15 Minsk Street, Klein saw Mary Gale again at tea time. He had initiated the meeting through Mistress Stellan Sammer.
Madam Mary, I found out that your husband went to the Quelaag Club while tailing him. However, I wasn't able to enter because I'm not a member of the club. Even so, according to my observations, about half an hour after your husband left, only one young lady came out. Her name is Erica Taylor, who lives at 126 New Year Street, Hillston Borough. She used to work at Coim for a period of time and is currently unemployed. I took a picture of her leaving the Quelaag Club.
Stellan sneered.
She's unemployed, yet she can live in Hillston Borough.
Mary wore a gloomy expression as she remained silent for a few seconds. You have to obtain material evidence of them being intimate. Oh, the Quelaag Club, right? I'll get 2 members to nominate you as a member, but you must fill in your particulars as famous detective. I can't get people to bring you in because it might not mesh well with the schedules of others.
All right.
Klein hesitated, but still asked,
Who will pay the club fees?
I will be responsible for the initial fees. This is in return for your efficiency. If you wish to remain in the club, you will have to pay the annual fee of about £15 yourself. There seemed to be a fire burning in Mary's eyes.
The fee is £15 a year, and the initiation fee is at least £50, a high-end club. Madam Mary, you sure are generous.
Klein immediately nodded.
I will provide you with the evidence as soon as possible.
After dinner, Klein went out again and continued to the Bravehearts Bar in the Bakerland Bridge area. There were 2 reasons for this. First, he wanted to show his helplessness in front of the military special department and the police who were observing him in secret. He wanted to appear as though he was trying every method to save himself. Second, he also wanted to deceive the mid-sequence Beyonder from the seer pathway under the ambassador's command. In matters involving the gray fog, Klein believed that the gentleman or lady would never be able to succeed in a divination, including his own resurrection and past events, as well as how he had successfully created the language of Foulness charm through the help of the true creator.
This is definitely a powerful item that can affect my opponent.
Klein had to maintain his act of feeling unsafe and his act of madly grasping at all kinds of straw to mislead his opponent in order to increase his chances of victory. Under the dark night, Klein entered the bar. Before he could get a beer, he saw Kaspars, the old man with the brandy nose, standing in front of the rat-baiting ring with his arms crossed.
Perfect timing. Merrick is looking for you.
Kaspar spotted Klein and limped over.
Merrick is looking for me?
Klein asked in shock. Instinctively, he touched the Azek's copper whistle in his pocket and considered what excuse he could use to politely decline the meeting.
Or could it be that wrapping the copper whistle with one's spirituality wouldn't cause any zombie-like phenomenon? It wasn't like Mr. Azek hadn't been to the cemetery before, nor had any corpses attacked him.
Klein tensed up. Before he could come up with an excuse, he saw Merrick, his face pale and his eyes filled with malice, walking over. He wasn't surrounded by any zombies.
Where are his zombies?
Klein thought with a mixture of puzzlement and relief. Merrick pointed to the card room and walked over there first. Klein looked into the distance and followed him since there were no zombies.
What's the matter?
Klein took the initiative to ask. Merrick, in a black vest and white shirt, sat on the card table and stared into Klein's eyes.
Does that job of yours still stand?
Huh?
Klein wasn't able to react in time. Merrick said in a low, slurred voice,
I have a friend who is short on money and is willing to accept this commission. She's stronger than me and should be able to protect you. However, she can only protect you for 3 days. The price is £1,000.
Why is a Beyonder willing to accept the commission only after I acquired the language of Foulness? However, this is good as well. This will be able to confuse the ambassador's Beyonder. After he painstakingly defeats Merrick's friend, my chances of success will become extremely high. The only problem is determining if Merrick's friend is trustworthy. I'll go above the gray fog to divine it.
Klein pondered for a moment and said,
Give me time to consider it and save up the necessary funds. It's not a small sum. Also, it's best if the person protecting me is hidden. It must be confidential. As for the 3 days of protection, that is up to me. It's definitely within these 2 weeks. Of course the seer would definitely be aware of it.
Klein silently added. As for money, he had already considered it from the beginning. If selling Merceau's Beyonder characteristic wasn't enough, he would ask Miss Justice for money. After all, he had made the preparations. Roselle's diary still had a lot of knowledge that could be sold. Of course, if the price was simply unacceptable, he could forgo it.
Now, although Merceau's Beyonder characteristic had become the language of Foulness charm, I still have Miss Justice. She still owes me the money needed for Sequence 8 Light Supplant, as well as the intelligence regarding the secret order. Combining those together, £1,000 would be enough.
Chapter 245, Confirmation. Back home at 15 Minsk Street, Klein was in no hurry to head above the gray fog to perform a divination. Instead, he acted as though nothing had happened. Hekasevin Nuacha. In the process, he heard an illusory prayer and vaguely recognized it as a woman's voice.
After experiencing the ravaging murmurs of the true creator, my ability in this aspect has apparently improved a little.
Klein turned the newspaper while engrossed in thought and settled himself on the reclining chair in a motionless, half-slumped state. He waited until the clock nearly struck 10 before putting down what he was doing and went to the bathroom on the second floor to clean himself up. Entering the bedroom and pulling the curtains shut, Klein went above the gray fog. He saw that the crimson star symbolizing justice was constantly expanding and contracting, and it was also echoing with prayers. Klein spread out his spirituality and made contact. Dressed in a white silk nightgown, Miss Justice appeared in front of him. Her figure was still blurry, as if she was in bed. After reciting his honorific name, Audrey cut to the chase.
Ambassador Bakerland is a Sequence 6 conspirer of the Hunter Pathway. He's suspected to have a Sequence 5 assistant. After I obtained detailed information, I got someone to inquire Mr. A. He has agreed to accept the assassination mission, but the conditions are 10,000 gold pounds or any of the potion formulas of Unshadowed, Cataclysmic and Terror, Prophet, and Manipulator. They do not need to be complete. A portion of the formula would suffice. I chose the former and paid an advance of 2,000 pounds. Honorable Mr. Fool, was my decision correct?
10,000 gold pounds. The corner of Klein's lips twitched as he forced himself to focus on the matter.
The Sequence 5 assistant should be that seer pathway infiltrator. The first thing that should be done is to overestimate the enemy. Would Mr. A have the ability to do it? Would he neglect the job after taking the money? Cataclysmic and Terror, Prophet, Manipulator, and Unshadowed are likely Sequence 4s. That is the threshold of a high Sequence Beyonder. It is very likely that Mr. A is one of the 22 oracles of the Aurora Order. To be stationed in the capital of capitals, Bakerland, means that he's second only to the 5 saints of the Aurora Order's upper echelons. He must be the cream of the crop among the oracles. The Aurora Order wields the secret suppliant pathway, which is the direct route to the true creator. As an oracle, he has a high probability of being a beyonder of this sequence chain. Based on Bakerland's position, it can be inferred that he's at Sequencer's 5, Shepherd. Of course, he could also be a Rose Bishop that's one sequence lower, but that would mean that he's more outstanding in other aspects, such as his intelligence. I have to remind Miss Justice that she shouldn't have too many interactions with Mr. A. The Beyonders of the Secret Suppliant sequence are either already lunatics exhibiting abnormalities or lunatics who have hidden their insanity well, almost without exception. Sequence 8 listeners in this sequence pathway often hear the voice of the true creator. Yes, only a lunatic would be bold enough to accept the mission of assassinating an Intis ambassador and have the courage to complete it. I have here a portion of the Unshadowed potion formula, as well as the corresponding ritual needed for the advancement. This can save Ms. Justice 10,000 gold pounds. Why would Mr. A only need the formulas of Unshadowed, Cataclysmic and Terror, Prophet, and Manipulator? Are these paths that can be swapped at high sequences of the secret suppliant pathway? That's a bit too much. That makes it 5 in total. Unshadowed is from the eternal blazing sun. Cataclysmic and Terror sounds like it's from the Lord of Storms, or maybe the Evernight Goddess. I previously determined that the eternal blazing sun, Lord of Storms, and the God of Knowledge and Wisdom have pathways that are relatively similar. Therefore, they view each other with animosity. From the looks of it, Cataclysmic and Terror belongs to the Lord of Storms and is sequence 4 of the Sailor sequence. Prophet is likely from the God of Knowledge and Wisdom. Then, which pathway does Manipulator belong to? Well, I guess it'll be interesting if they can all be exchanged with the sequence corresponding to the true creator. I guess. I cannot give the Unshadowed formula to Mr. A. Not even a portion. The Aurora Order members are all lunatics who are always looking for opportunities to take revenge on the world to the detriment of public safety. Items of strategic importance must not be traded with them. This isn't just a question of the bottom line, it also involves my own safety. Once the time is ripe, those lunatics from the Aurora Order might very well sacrifice the entire city. Let Miss Justice spend the 10,000 pounds then. Part of it includes the payment she would like to give to my blessed. The rest can be made up to her with the knowledge I already know.
Klein reached out and pinched his cheek. Hi, boar. He didn't reply to Justice immediately. Instead, he conjured a pen and paper, ready to make a divination. Klein had no idea who Merrick's friend was. He could only tell from the pronoun she that the person was a woman. Failure was inevitable if he wanted to directly divine the reliability of the person in question. However, Klein could make an indirect divination regarding his own safety, which would have a much higher success rate. As for whether he would suffer an interference or how accurate the outcome would be, he wasn't worried at all thanks to the gray fog shielding. After more than 10 seconds of deliberation, Klein wrote, "It's risky for me to hire Merrick's friend to be my bodyguard for 3 days." Putting the pen away, he removed his spirit pendulum, focused his mind, and quickly performed the divination. When he opened his eyes, he saw that the topaz pendant was rotating clockwise. However, the amplitude was very small, and its speed was very slow.
There's a certain risk, but it's quite low. Reliable.
Klein nodded slightly and changed to divine about Mr. A. Similarly, he had no direct contact with Mr. A, and all he knew was based on descriptions and inference. It was difficult to find out whether or not he was capable enough or willing to keep his promise. All he could do was make an indirect divination. As an excellent seer, Klein quickly determined the direction, and that was to divine Ambassador Bakerland. This ambassador had relatively more connections with him, and the information he had about him was even more detailed. Klein knew very well what the other party was involved in, and as a divination target there were no problems. After some thought, Klein wrote, "Bakerland Jean Medan will have his life threatened by Mr. A." To prevent it from failing, he tried his best to make the words vague in this low-confidence divination and didn't require a definite answer. This time, Klein saw that the spirit pendulum was still rotating clockwise, but it had become faster and the amplitude had increased.
It means that Mr. A will attempt to complete the mission, and that there's a good chance of success.
Klein slowly exhaled and began to respond to Miss Justice's prayer.
Sure, there's no problems with your decision. You absolutely must not show yourself when entrusting this mission. My blessed wishes for £1,000 for his activities. It will be done in the same way as before, and it would be best if it can be completed by tomorrow. This will be payment for the light suppliant formula. You do not need to seek out news regarding the secret order any further. However, if you obtain any relevant information, I will do a trade with you.
After learning that the infiltrator was a beyonder in the seer pathway, Klein's need for information about the secret order became less urgent. He had originally wanted to ask for more than £1,000, but in consideration of how Miss Justice had to pay £10,000 to assassinate the ambassador, it was likely that her finances would be stretched to the limit. Therefore, he only asked for the minimum. After doing all of this, Klein didn't linger and immediately returned to the real world. Audrey was holding a music score and humming a melody. The red moon was faintly discernible outside the window. Suddenly, a thick gray fog appeared in front of her. A figure seated on an ancient chair looked down at her and spoke in a low voice. Audrey let out a breath of relief after hearing Mr. Fool's response. She was no longer as nervous as she was.
£1,000. My debt to Mr. Fool is close to being paid off. I feel so much more relaxed suddenly.
Audrey rested the music score against her chest and thought with her dimples showing. Although she only had £1,000 to spend for quite a considerable period of time in the coming days, being put in a tight financial situation, all she needed to do was grit her teeth, and squeezing out £1,000 wouldn't be a problem.
I'll borrow more from Glaint and drag it out with more installments.
Audrey had quite a good education in finances. After all, her father was a powerful banker behind the scenes. At noon on Thursday, Klein heard another illusory prayer. He then confirmed that Miss Justice had deposited the money into his anonymous account. The bank reconciliation and liquidation done in Bakerland could be completed on the same day, meaning that from Friday, Klein would be able to withdraw the cash from any Bakerland bank branch in the city. After lunch, Klein once again saw Mary Gale. She led him outside the Quelaag Club, where the two members were waiting. One was a well-known surgeon, Aaron Series, and the other was the aristocratic equestrian teacher, Talim Dumont. After greeting each other, the lanky and somewhat aloof doctor, wearing gold-rimmed glasses, entered the club first, leaving the equestrian teacher, Talim, who had short brown curly hair, to converse with Klein amidst smiles.
If it wasn't for Mary mentioning you, I wouldn't have known that Bakerland has had an additional outstanding detective join its ranks. If there's anything I need to do in the future, I'll look for you.
Then, let me thank you in advance.
Klein smiled in response. According to Mary's introduction on the carriage, he learned that Talim was originally of noble blood. His grandfather had a noble title of Viscount, but it was a pity that his grandfather had squandered all his wealth. His father had nearly 10 brothers and more than 6 sisters, and as nobles whose titles were determined by the amount of land they possessed, once the amount of land went beneath a particular standard, the hereditary nobility title would be reduced. However, that also depended on the king's mood. Tisalim was unlike the other children of nobility who could obtain a considerable sum of money when they reached adulthood. And due to his grandfather's reputation, he had no means of entering the government as an employee, or to be a butler of another noble family. Therefore, he could only play to his advantages and became an equestrian teacher for many nobles. His income was quite sizable, with about £400 a year.
Sigh, divorce really leads to poverty.
It was unknown if Talim was hinting at Mary Gale's situation or if he was reminded of his grandfather, who seemed to be more of Intis ancestry. Unable to engage in the conversation, Klein followed him into the Keylog Club, where he saw a large, brightly lit hall.